No. So time for us to start our first webinar of 2023. Sara Tindall of Nord Anglia and Laurent Balagué of Docebo. Laurent, Sara, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Don. So, hello everyone. My name is Sara, and I work for Nord Anglia Education. I lead digital learning for the company. Nord Anglia Education is a premium international schools group. We have over 80 schools in more than 30 countries. We keep acquiring, which is why I find it hard to remember the numbers. And our headquarters is based in London, and we have 5 regional centres. We have over 15,000 employees, 80% of whom are educators. And the real joy of working at Nord Anglia Education is that teachers just love to learn. Upskilling is part of their career DNA. So, when we're working with folk who are really keen and excited to learn, it's just a pleasure to work with them. Laurent, I shall hand over to you now.
Thank you, Sara. Good morning, everyone. I'm Laurent Balagué. I'm a product line manager at Docebo in charge of the measurement and analytics products. Docebo is a global leader in learning technology. We provide a learning platform that covers a quite large scope of needs from learning professionals, from being able to create, distribute, manage content, e-learning or others, and being able to analyze and measure its impact. And it's not only providing a large scope of capabilities, but being able to help our clients for all types of use case when the learners are your employees, but also your clients, your partners, etc. So it's a quite exciting way to look at learning on a very large scope.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we enjoy with working with the Chamber is very much its partnership approach and actually being able to sit down and think through challenges. So, for example, Lauren and I really enjoy, well, I certainly do, enjoy our nerd out about data stories and really just to set the scene of what we're going to cover today. Talking about why upskilling is key for business survival. We're going to kind of share the story of Nord Anglia Education, how we moved from kind of meeting a teacher need and want for learning to our L&D department really being seen as a valued business partner. By our C-suite, frankly. We've always been recognised as quite important because we're an education business, so we're making sure that the quality of our education is first rate. But we've been able to turn the dial really and get folk to understand that we are actually making a significant contribution to the bottom line. Upskilling is really valuable if you want to grow and develop your business. And spoiler alert, we're going to be talking a lot about the importance of relationships and taking control of the data story. So if you keep your ears open for both those themes, they're going to run right through.
Yes. Don, I
Yes.
think we start with a question.
As always with the Learning and Skills Group webinars, we start with a question. Let's pose it. Who wants to ask the question?
Why don't you, Laurent? You're great at asking questions.
With my accent, okay, my kids make fun of my accent, but so how do you currently show the value of your learning interventions? And I'm sure there are many things to say about it.
I'm very much looking forward to the answers on this one. I've been, as you know, chairing the Learning Technologies Conference since 2000. I can safely say that at every edition of the conference, we've asked this question. It's about ROI, it's about value, it's about impact. And I'd love any answers from anybody in the room. How do you currently show the value of what you're doing? I can see people are typing. I don't know if everyone can see this. We can see the names typing. It's very exciting. And then we wait for the text to start arriving, the answers. This amount of typing suggests that people have got quite complex and long answers. Belen is working for a startup. I guess we need to measure success. Well, exciting. I guess we need to measure success of learners in the LMS. Let's not jump on that as a question yet. I think it's a really interesting point. Is the LMS the place to go to look at the value of the learning interventions? Maybe. Well, I'm not going to prejudge what Laurent and Sara might say about this. We've got other people chatting as well. Please do put your thoughts into the chat. What do you do to show the value of your learning intervention? And by the way, one legitimate answer is, no, we don't. We just do training. I've spent a great probably a couple of decades of the first part of my working life doing training with no thought about the value of the interventions at all. Okay, Jana says, the team feels more confident in the role, projects have better outcomes, and better scores on our project health checks. So that's a really interesting combination, isn't it, of, if you like, formal, informal, probably quantitative, better outcomes and better scores, and also qualitative, people feel more confident. That's a really interesting combination. Grace saying, currently we're creating marketing information based on testimonials. And some people might say, well, anecdotal evidence, does that really show value? I'm a great fan, actually, of getting people to do that. Very often, if you're delivering training internally, having good anecdotes, good quotes to share in the business is actually really valuable. Victoria says a combination of measures, staff survey and annual competency. Emma's talking about learning needs analysis as well as business objectives. Value is tough to define, says Andrew, and measure because it relies on two elements, perceived benefit and cost. It does, and it's very difficult to define either of those. But yeah, please do put the answers and the thoughts in that box underneath. And Bill, I'm going to drop yours over there, so we've got it there. It depends on what your desired outcomes are. Absolutely. Okay. Right. Look, I'm seeing two themes here, Laurent and Sara. What I'm seeing is nobody is saying we don't do it. Why on earth would we bother with that? I think we've established that having some form of value around learning is important. Okay. You've got two things going on underneath that. One of which is we have this qualitative stuff. We've got anecdotes. We've got people giving us case studies and so on. And then behind that, you've got the harder measures, the quantitative stuff. We're seeing Victoria's talking about a range of ROI measures. For example, a staff survey. I think that's quite a hard measure. And Bill is saying, quite rightly, it depends on the desired outcome. The value is often difficult to measure. So, Laurent, Sara, is this what you're expecting?
This is very interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
I think the first thing that we see on these feedbacks is that first there's so much diversity in learning interventions. There can be so many forms, and that also affects the way we will consider value and the way we will try to measure this value. And the second feedback that we get is that it's hard, and I think we'll come back on that. It's not easy because the impact of learning can be nowhere or can be everywhere in an organization. So we are dealing with all the skills, so all the functions of an organization. So that makes our job precious, but quite hard as well. And yes, and so there are many ways. They're from not easy, but scalable ways, and solutions that are harder and maybe less scalable, such as measuring the ROI. So I think this is very good and representative sample of feedbacks and stories.
Yeah. Sara, any thoughts?
What's really interesting seeing here is I'd recommend to folk that you actually document your data journey. Some of these observations, I remember when I first had them and kind of noticed how I've kind of like grown and matured. There's other points here where I'm like, crumbs, I really need to consider that. I think it's really valuable because so often when you're dealing with evidencing your value to the business, you're always looking at how you can improve. So in your head, often you're thinking, I can be better, which on the flip side can be, I'm not good enough. So if you just remember where you've been, you're so much better than how you were even a year ago, and look at where you are at now. So consider, the opportunities for how you'll be next year, helps you kind of really feel encouraged, and also just gives you the courage of your convictions when you're talking to folk, when they say, well, can you evidence this or that or the other, you can say not yet and still feel really confident to say that. So
I also think it's important to say that if you weren't doing anything and you start doing something in terms of looking at the impact you've had, and what you do shows you that you are not having your expected impact, you're actually in a better position. Now, that doesn't sound like it, but you are. It's much better to know you're going in the wrong direction than to blithely continue. And Trish Uhl has this great phrase, to prove and improve. So collecting data, looking at stuff enables us to prove what we're doing, but also to improve what we're doing. And if we don't have that, how on earth do we know what we're doing in any sense? I love what Sabrina's point here was. She's saying, because she's working in a contact center, now they are super data-driven places. And she's saying, we can use KPIs as one indicator. We also look at retention and feedback from the support teams. And I really like that. So as well as it would be very easy to jump on all the data you've got in the support center, but in addition to talking about other things like feedback from the support teams. Beck's a very simple set of answers here. Reduction on support requests and help needed. If you're training people, particularly with IT and systems, and you have fewer help desk inquiries, that generally means you're doing your job. And it's a fairly loose measure, but actually it's a pretty good one. And it's something you could stick a number next to, which is always attractive. Good. Lovely. Right. Look, we could continue chatting about this all day, but we have a limited amount of time. Do you want to move on?
Yes, I mean, it segues really nicely into the next slide. The next topic is about scaling L&D. Just excuse me. How you kind of the importance of the data conversation that we've just had is this is the foundation on which you can scale the reach and impact of what you're doing. And I'll just share a story of what's happening with us with Nordangler Education. So prior to the pandemic, we were doing pretty well, kind of meeting teacher needs, doing our best to try and get our various schools to kind of think in a whole school sort of strategic way. Then the pandemic hit and everyone was totally focused on online and hybrid learning. So what was really fascinating was as a business, we were all galvanized into upskilling in a specific way. We already had a lot of training materials on the use of educational technologies and teaching and learning anyway, so we were very well prepared. We established the L&D team and the education teams and the IT teams just became very, very close, and together we were quite integral in protecting our educational offer for all our students, so much so that our CEO was able to say with great confidence about the impact we had in protecting the business when we came out of the pandemic, which is a really proud moment. But what was really valuable with that was then other functions started to recognize how we could then help them deal with the whole post-pandemic issues. So, marketing is all about student re-recruitment, for example. They needed to get their staff across all our schools performing to specific levels. So they had training. They said, can you help us roll this out in a way that's sustainable and a way that we can actually measure performance? And so we're doing that with them, getting lovely feedback from one of our regional teams in particular, saying they're seeing some fantastic improvement as a result of that, and they want to do more localized training to meet the cultural context in which their schools work, which is so exciting. And I think that that's kind of the key to kind of, once you're able to start evidencing value even in a small part of the business, other functions start to notice, and then they say, great, help me do better in what I'm trying to do. And it's just a joy because you're helping people improve, and you're making a real impact in my context on student outcomes. It's a pleasure and a joy to see. But what was really important for us to be able to do this is we had the vision, but frankly we needed the technology to help us to be able to do this as well. And we're often kind of doing sort of like, vision outstripping technology, and then you kind of have to make the business case to get the technology to meet. And this is where I think that I'd like to just, name check Docebo. We went through a very vigorous selection process, and Docebo were the right partner for us as a business. Yeah, you guys have been really helpful in helping us think through how to meet our ambitions for our staff.
Well, thank you, Sarah. It's been
Yeah.
you're working in a fascinating industry. As I'm saying, in Docebo, we see a lot of different use cases and industry. But the fact that you work in the education industry gives you an amazing story, because you have people who are passionate about learning. And I think maybe some people in the audience would love to be in a situation, but it's also not always it's also another challenge to have so many educational experts in your organization.
Yes, and actually the challenge now is, although everyone really wants to learn, they now no longer have the time. So this is now our new challenge. We can never rest on our laurels, and we're having to completely reconfigure whole programs that worked fine before the pandemic, but we're having to completely alter mode of delivery because of the time factor now, just because of parental demands, reducing, having to reduce teacher numbers just because after the pandemic, a lot of people wanted to go back home. And international education, that's quite a tricky challenge. Yeah, so this is again why I think perhaps if we move on to the next slide in talking of why upskilling is so crucial. Not only is it crucial for colleagues in the business, it's also really crucial for you as an L&D professional. As I was talking earlier about, keeping a track of how you're growing and developing in your evidencing your value to the business. You need to always be keeping an eye out, joining events like this, talking to other businesses, sort of thinking where we're going as a field, because so far it's been delightful. Our CEO goes, we need to do this, and we as a team are kind of like, oh, you mean this thing we've prepared earlier, and that's a really powerful and valuable thing to do. So in our context, I saw upskilling as something that was going to be. There's other businesses who are far further down the line than we are in terms of skills matrix and aligning content to that. And I've been reading a lot of what they're doing, knowing that this is suddenly going to become very important to the business, and it has. And fortunately, we are, in step and ready to provide the business with what they need.
On this topic, I would like to add, I think we are in a unique situation in 2023. So where because of the risk of recession, because of inflation, there are many companies around the world that are preparing for a tough year and maybe having some cost reduction plans. But at the same time, the difficulty to hire, retain talents is still as high as it ever been. So there's sort of double pressure that is probably unique in today's situation that makes upskilling even more important than ever.
Absolutely.
It's a way to improve productivity and optimize costs on a way, and the other to solve this question of retaining and finding the right talents on the market and not being able to find them. So maybe the good way is to find them inside the organization.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, someone mentioned staff surveys. They are really valuable because we heard loud and clear. Folk weren't really clear about what their pathways for growth were within the business, and it was more clear for the teachers because it's more obvious within the school structure, but the 20% were kind of mainly because of the pandemic and not being in an office environment, not really clear about what their contribution was to the business and where do they go next. And what was, again, fantastic to see, HR just dealt with this immediately. We were able to partner with them, and we're developing some really brilliant and exciting innovations around talent pipeline management now, which is just great and exciting to see. Again, early days, and I'm learning from how other people are doing it well. But important for retention because there's all kinds of stats about how much it costs to recruit someone versus being able to promote internally, and particularly when you're as a larger business as Nord Anglia Education, and the kind of salaries international principals and more senior staff can command, it's quite important that we have a solid talent pipeline.
Sara, this is an issue that I think increasingly learning development people are sort of bumping up against, and we have to decide how much it's our role. Personally, I think we are deeply involved in the whole talent planning process for the business. I don't think we can isolate ourselves from it. I was talking earlier about how I'd spent decades doing classroom training, and it's true that in the old days, your job was to turn up, talk, and go away, and that was fine, but that's no longer the case. And of course, working in educational establishments, which I did, it's a very flat structure. There is very little room for career progression, typically in most organizations, because you're either teaching or you're supporting, or you are directing people to do that and that's pretty much it. Now, you're talking about providing people with career pathways. That sounds fantastic. Is that something you're doing yourself, or you're working with the HR or the talent department internally at Nord Anglia to do that?
So we're supporting the talent department. Another fascinating sort of, I can't think of a better word than thing that I've observed is L&D departments that work within HR. Folk that I've met there seem to be quite jealous that we are not part of HR. We're actually part of the education function, which actually has given us a lot of freedoms. There's also been difficulties in terms of, it was evidencing value to the business, but the pandemic really helped break down that wall. But what has been helpful in kind of like being outside of a traditional corporate function has been to be that kind of critical friend, to kind of say, this looks really strong. Did you know that you could scale it digitally in this way? Or have you thought about measuring? We think that you're probably what you're measuring is not really valuable. It's equivalent to hits and clicks.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can change the data story, which will help you get more funding, sort of conversations. So.
Brilliant. There's a lot of questions coming in. Before we deal with those, Laurent, do you want to just pick up on anything that Sarah has said?
Well, I think maybe I would ask another question to Sara, maybe to share.
I feel a bit bad here because on my video, Sarah's in the middle, and we've got these two guys each side of her, like throwing questions.
A rose between two thorns, gentlemen.
Well, that's beautiful. Laurent, go ahead.
No, yes. So maybe I know a little bit of your story, Sara. Could you give some examples of successes, actually, of upskilling initiative that you managed to grow at a very large scale? You are
yes.
You're working in so many countries with a very large organization. I would love to hear some of these successes.
Okay, I'd say my favorite one is working with our marketing team, and they are all over it. I have a lot of respect for what they do, and they were very clear post-pandemic. These are the skills that we want to see in our staff in all our schools, in the way that they communicate with parents. Right, it's the whole gamut from kind of like managing the digital systems that kind of handle the whole parent pipeline, all the way to how you talk to parents in different cultural contexts, and also taking into consideration where they are generationally, and how to speak to them in a way that resonates with that. Really fantastic training. Oh gosh, I think there's possibly like 30 courses on all of this, very well designed by an external company. So we have all this training. What's the best way to deliver it? And we're like, well, not live webinars. So it was a case of turning it into asynchronous learning that's kind of chunked up. And my colleague, I hope she's on this call and listening in, so her ears can burn. My colleague Vicky did a brilliant job in publishing them onto our Docebo platform in such a way that it's really easy to see. These are the types of training for that kind of skill. These are the types of training for that kind of skill. And it's all very visual. So not only is it about making the training accessible on an LMS, making it easy for the learner to kind of map their journey, so they can first of all assess where it is their areas that they need to grow, and then find quickly that kind of training. And as I alluded to earlier, the head of marketing in our Southeast Asia region just loved it and said, and I want to add to this. And so we're working with her so she can develop materials that are contextually appropriate for that region, which is presenting new challenges, and how my team are not a bottleneck for content creation, and we're looking as a partner to help us do that.
Yeah,
so that's one story. I've got many.
That's a good one. That shows, the balance between trying to have a very scalable approach, but also finding the right partners to achieve this scalability, and also localization when you realize and the business
exactly
really needs it.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about reporting, but I need to hold off because I think, Don, you're about to ask a question.
But reporting is crucial, and there's no point in having data and insights if you're just sitting on it. I just want to give a couple of shout outs to people who've raised points, and Andrew's saying that he's expecting talent and learning development to be more integrated. And I think if we're not integrating ourselves, more with talent, then we're missing a trick. And certainly on my global sentiment survey, which is out at the moment, one of the things that's rising up the charts this year is skills-based talent management. That's increasingly seen as being important for learning and development this year. But also I asked people the question, what's your greatest challenge this year? And one of the big themes is time. And that's absolutely coming up in the questions box here. And you talked about it earlier, Sarah. So let's just go to some of the questions here. Everyone's too busy, says Yana. I'm sorry, it's Yana or Jana. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Do you have any tips on how to make the case for upskilling to leadership? I mean, this is effectively the same question, which is a perpetual question. How do we make the case for training / upskilling? But with the particular emphasis at the moment that everyone is time poor. Time and attention poor. This is one of the things I'm getting from my survey. Last year it was everyone is exhausted with COVID. Now it's, well, they're still exhausted. Plus, we haven't got the time to do anything because for some reason, because we're working increasingly in a hybrid environment, you're having to do more. I mean, we know why, but it doesn't make any sense logically. Bill says the same thing. My biggest challenge is everyone's busy. Oliver says, same here. And Victoria says, agreed, time scarcity is our biggest challenge. And Ty says the same thing. Time is always a huge factor. We've got a consistent approach here in the room.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants your tips on how on earth do you make the case for time being put aside for people to learn. Laurent, I'd love your thoughts as well. Let's start with Sara, but I think, Laurent, you must have talked to a lot of people about this and you can have their input too. But Sara, let's start with you. How do you make the case that it's worth spending the time doing this?
Gosh, if I had the answer, I'd be writing the book and not needing to work again. So at the moment, this is what we're discovering. We're kind of taking a three-pronged approach here. We're talking to our learners and just making sure that what we're offering is relevant. So we'll kind of like hear, oh, I have no time to do this half-hour course that you're wanting me to do. And yet we had 40 staff turn up for a 1.5 hour long webinar on changes that are happening to the International Baccalaureate curriculum. So that was really relevant to them because it was really important to their jobs, and investing 1.5 hours of their time meant they didn't have to work it out by themselves. And we were able to connect them with someone who within the IBO, the company that produces a curriculum, so they're able to directly ask him their questions, and so they were able to clearly see that this investment of time was going to have a lot of benefit and save them time in the long run. So it's about really making sure that what you're providing is relevant, and it's very easy to say that. So it's like, how do you discover the relevancy?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to?
Well, I was going to follow up as well. Relevant to who? Because it's not always the individual who decides where they spend their time. Very often it's a manager who decides actually where they spend their time. So it has to be relevant to two people. First person has to be motivated and excited to go and do it, but the manager has to say, yeah, that solves a problem for me. So Sara, any thoughts?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's got to be, and a lot of our work now is around equipping senior leaders in schools to be developing professional development strategies from a whole school perspective.
Right.
And that means actually, because we have over 80 schools, we can't do this for them all now. So we've been asked to provide them with training to be able to do this, so then they can go to the whole school and establish, okay, this is as a community, this is what we need. Okay, so we've established that early years, you guys want to focus on this, primary you want to focus on this, high school, secondary you want to do this. This is the time it's going to take, this is how we're going to solve it. And so they do it together. So it's very much kind of like bottom up, top down approach, but very strategic. And the importance is professional development works best when everyone's pulling in the same direction. So there's a very strong steer from leadership saying, this is the direction in which we need to go, so we really need you to focus on this, and this is the training that's going to support you to get you to where we're expecting you to be, and here's the time to be able to do it. So it's that kind of virtuous circle, but as we all know, it's very messy in reality, but this is what we're working towards.
Well, what you're describing though is the essential piece, which is that decisions about time come from the top, and once you've made that link between learning and impact and strategy, which you've clearly done, then you're able to get that time argument won. But it doesn't happen overnight. Laurent, can we talk about what you've seen?
Yeah, no, sure. And I would say that There are two ways of looking at learning. It could be seen as an additional stuff I need to do, a new training, and it's a way. Yeah, this is creating more problems than it really solves. The other way is looking at as learning as part of the core value of an organization, the core must do of any individual to share my experience and to grow as an employee, as an individual. So I believe that we are talking about the link between L&D and talent development, but I believe that upskilling and learning culture shouldn't be now executive and CEO topics and not just L&D or HR. And our mission is to sort of evangelize that so that all our executives understand that to achieve productivity, to achieve the agility that organizations must get to survive and grow, upskilling and high learning culture are essential for success.
And we're having that very same conversation right now. So though, educators get it and know it, it's kind of making it part of the DNA of the business, that it's important to do. And, we're getting a lot of support, but it's actually embedding it into the process as well. So then it just becomes second nature. When our principals are reporting to their regional directors, is that part of the conversation? How's your professional development strategy going on? Is that there? And so that's what we're exploring at the moment.
So this is the key thing, isn't it? You get the people one over at the top, you build it into the processes, as you say, Sarah. I think that is crucial, because when push comes to shove, sorry, so that's an English idiom, and we're never an entirely English-speaking language. When things get hard in a business, in an organization, people make choices. And managers in particular, the people in the middle, have to decide, what am I doing this week, this month? And at that point, they have to say, I have to tell somebody else that I've, as well as meeting my weekly, quarterly targets, I have also done this stuff here, which is important for me. And the places where I've seen this work best, Sarah, is always where there is an explicit reporting basis for what's going on with learning. So have you met your targets for this quarter? Great. And what about your people development? Are you meeting your targets there as well? And they are in the same conversation. If that doesn't happen, then when things get hard, the focus is always on the first target, the measurable stuff that you're supposed to do each month.
Yeah. And what's important about that is making sure that you're asking folks to report on impact rather than number of courses attended, because otherwise it just becomes like, yeah, we watched 3 LinkedIn videos, and so you've got to be really careful about what you're actually asking people to report on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're talking about activity numbers, honestly, people don't care. And I hate to say this, but nobody cares about that. They only care about the results. Laurent, sorry, you were about to say something.
No, I completely agree, and maybe we can actually move to the next slide. And
you have controls. You can move the slides when you want to.
Thank you.
Click the button, there we go.
Many people talked about it, and at the end, when we are, as Sara was telling, scaling L&D means being also able to scale the measurement and to be able to prove at a larger scale that you're having a growing impact on your organization. But it's hard. If we look at the Kirkpatrick scale, it's 60 years old. So there are many things that have been said and invented in the research, but many years later, it's still very hard. And I think there is one of the reasons is that as learning professionals, we are in our DNA forward-looking. Our mission is to prepare for the skills of the future, so to prepare the next program, the next upskilling project, and proving and measuring the impact of learning is looking backwards. So I think it's harder for L&D professionals than for other organizations that are more, better organized to look at the past. So we must be able to prove and improve the impact of what we do, but in a pragmatic way. And I think that means to be able to design the adequate evaluation strategy. And there are 4 best practices plus 1 that I would like to share. The first one, and Sara has already talked about it, align with the business. As soon as the business has a need, make sure that first training is the right solution. Why do they need training? Sometimes they have, our business partners have already the solution, They want a course, they want a webinar, but is it really the right solution? So agree on the expected outcomes in terms of behavioral change, in terms of skills, and then propose a solution. And I think this comes at the earlier stage of any need in terms of a skill, any new program. Second best practice is have an 80-20 approach. Really, look at all your content and training portfolio. It's very likely that 20% of them will have the highest impact, maybe 80% of the impact. And this is where you should spend most of your efforts to have an impact focused approach. Maybe for other topics where your business partners expect less, you can be less ambitious and just verify that the quality is just okay. But for the top programs where maybe you have a new leadership model that you're about to roll out, maybe you have a new product that your company is about to launch, and here you will need to be more ambitious. Maybe have a dedicated evaluation process for the pilot phase, and be able to, at some point, be able to tell the story of how the courses affect the skills, the behaviors, and in the end were a strong contributor to the final success of the project. The third best practice is the concept of leading indicators. We talked about ROI, and of course, being able to measure the return investment is good, but it's hard and it's also lagging. You will only be able to do that at the end of the project, and in many cases, it might be too late. So I really think that this concept of leading indicators is essential for the success of any kind of evaluation strategy. Being able to collect the right indicators that are early proofs of success or troubles ahead. It could be how much people share some content. It could be what they say about their action plans after a course, their intentions to apply. It could be the feedback in a survey about anticipated impact, quantitatively or qualitatively. This is not perfect, but the great value of all these examples is that they can be measured very early. When you have enough time to adjust your plan, correct the next rollout, and improve the impact, as we were saying earlier. Last of these four is being able to ensure accountability, so that if there is an issue, you have defined the responsibilities in your organization. If there is an issue with instructors, is there an issue with quality, if there is an issue with technology, who is in charge of analyzing the issue and making the correction plan? This is also essential for success. But sorry, go ahead, Sara.
So this is such a powerful framework. And I think that if you're looking at something like this and thinking where to begin, start small. It's fine, because turn this into a habit. That's what's the most valuable thing that you can do for yourself. Turn this into a habit. Don't try and kind of apply it across everything to begin with. And then from there, that's how you can kind of strengthen those evaluative muscles. Sorry to interrupt, Laurent. Do go ahead.
No, but you are absolutely right. It's being too ambitious too early can cause a lot of problems. So it has to be progressive and scalable. And actually, that was perfect transition to the last thing I'd like to say on this is that you cannot reinvent everything every time you have a new course, you have a new program. But at the same time, obviously, learning needs in an organization are very diverse, as we said earlier. So what's the right granularity? And now I really believe that the use case is the right compromise and the right granularity. Separating onboarding, leadership development, talent development, and maybe other situations where learning is needed for your customers, for your partners, for enabling some specific professions in your organization. These are the right use case where there is more homogeneity. So I'm just sharing, how at Docebo we view the different use cases. It's our perception. I know maybe others are relevant as well, but each of these items that you see here have the value of having more homogeneity in terms of business partners. When we talk about sales enablement, well, there is a chief sales officer usually, and there is a sales enablement team. When we talk about customer training, there is usually also a customer education team in organization. So there is more homogeneity in terms of business partners, business KPIs. So this is the right level to define an evaluation strategy and also potentially to aggregate all these needs to have also optimization in terms of learning platform costs and learning technologies.
And to add to that, to the folk listening, what is great about businesses like Docebo, and if you're interested in content curation, there is also, oh crumbs, I can't believe I've forgotten their name. I should name check them. Sorry, I've forgotten them. But there's companies that are trying to sell you product, and they're doing a lot of strategic thought in these areas. So go to things like learning technologies and hear what they're saying about evaluation, about learning use cases, because they're thinking really hard about this because they want your business. You don't necessarily have to buy their business, but you can get benefit of their brains. So I can really I can listen to Laurent all day. I can really recommend you trying to meet up with him when he's next in the country. There you go, a bit plug for you there, Laurent.
Maybe soon.
Yeah.
There's lots of great comment coming through. We're going to save it though. We probably got like 5 minutes before we wrap up, and I think then if we push through, not push through, but once we get through to the end of the presentation. So don't worry, people who've got great questions, Jill, Carl, love your comments. Jana, we're gonna come back to that when we wrap up. Very clearly, as always is the case, a good conversation stimulates people's thinking, and let's continue, but don't worry, people. I'm not ignoring the great thinking and commenting that's taking place.
Maybe, Sarah, we could, I would like to maybe to conclude that, because in the end, all this evaluation is a way to help L&D to be closer to the business. So maybe we can continue this and hear your story of achieving this.
Yeah, well, achieving. I suppose being on, I don't think you ever will fully achieve it, because I think if you think about the corporate sector, everyone's kind of vying for a piece of the budget pie. Let's face it. So I think that if you think of it as a competition and something you're going to win, you're going to fail. So I think if it's better to really focus about strengthening those relationships and being that business partner. And as we all know, successful relationships need constant maintenance. And so that's why I say, we'll never kind of like achieve it, because it's a continual thing. But I suppose I often talk about having something called the relationships bank, and you start off, you put deposits in there, and I think that if I were to assess where we are in the relationships banks with different parts of the business, there's one department that we've got a very, very high deposit with them, and so that's going really well. And there's others where I need to kind of spend more time investing in that, so we can get to the same level of kind of like trust. And also, where I want to be is for these folk to kind of think, okay, we need to achieve this for the business, and L&D becomes a natural sort of, so we need to bring these folks in to help us out for the upskilling aspect, for example, or to help us think about how we're going to measure progress, things like that. But really, in terms of the story, I guess I've sort of alluded to it, how the pandemic really made a switch for us, and we saw that. And I remember for a lot of L&D departments kind of noticed an uptick in their perceived value. And we knew that we couldn't rest on our laurels on that, and we had to start backing it up with data. And we knew the kind of data we wanted to collect, but we couldn't find a system that could do it for us. And then, hooray, our customer success manager at Docebo said, well, we've got this fantastic new product called Learning Impact. Would you like to look at it? And this is exactly what we need. And there's also a learning analytics one, these two suites of tools that are really helpful in helping us to be able to gather data on the impact training is having on learners. It's self-reporting, but it's the kind of data that we've never been able to gather at scale before, which is so important. And we've also, again, got an analytics tool that is helping us interrogate this leading data that Laurent is talking about. So what's been really important has been our ambitions for a data story has been met by technology that's helping us to kind of gather data at the scale we need to tell this story. And although I'd say we're not using the tools as well as we can, because we're quite new in this whole kind of like asking the right questions kind of thing. Still, we've got folks within the business who are very good. We've got, you know, data scientists in the business who are helping us think about these questions and how to interrogate the data. So that's kind of like a roundabout way of answering the question, Laurent. Is there anything you'd want me to focus on more?
But I think this is very interesting. Well, the last part, thank you, shows that, you know, that we see many organizations, you know, moving fast on data, on being more data-driven analytics, and learning is catching up. Learning has been behind many other functions, but we see learning as catching up very fast, and it's great. We are very excited to see that learning data now is close to the core part of the, you know, organization data, and that many organizations such as yours, Sarah, have been able to build a very close relationship to business. In the end, this is the best measure of success for learning organization, is how trust you have been able to build with executives and the business partners internally.
And that trust is really important because the kind of data we're trying to gather includes student outcomes, which is hugely longitudinal. So when you've got, for example, marketing who can report, you know, weekly on their progress, you know, that we've got something, you know, we've got a data point which happens annually. But in the meantime, we're having to kind of like find leading data that kind of evidences that the training that's happening within our L&D platform is actually supporting this, but also within the other functions in terms of, you know, when you're trying to, those of you who are trying to kind of help improve skills and behaviors, again, these things take time to embed in. So how do you prove that a training program has actually worked? You know, and it's kind of using these digital tools that are helping us to kind of build that story and reinforce that trust. So we can say, we believe it's working because of this, and let's look at it to see if it's continuing in that way. And when it's not working, what's fantastic, because, you know, the trust is there and folk aren't kind of going like, oh, you know, L&D are irrelevant. We can be honest. We can say, this isn't working, so this is what we're going to do about it. And I often say, it's not your mistakes that define you, it's what you do about them that define you. And so be really open with data, be open when things are not working, because that's your opportunity to show that you can pivot.
Yes, and so maybe So I love this, and we were initially talking about, you know, measuring is to help prove and improve impact, but there's something in the middle, is to prove that you improve it. So
Yes.
and that's something, that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, much more succinct. That's why I like riffing with Laurent.
Shall we go over to our wrap up and try to deal with some of the issues, questions that have come up and what have you? Because we have about something like 10
There's
minutes.
been some amazing questions.
Yeah, as always, always a smart crowd, always a good conversation going on. Lots of valuable stuff. By the way, top left-hand corner there, you can see the ebook that Chabo have prepared, which is 6 strategies for engaging e-learning. So there's a link on the left-hand side there in the resources box. Click on that by all means, and you're away to go and download that. Sorry, I didn't ask you for your speaker contact details. If you want to be contacted, Laurent, do you want me to put your details in there? I can do that while we're speaking.
So sure. So
don't worry, I'll take care of that. I'll take care of it. I'll put your LinkedIn in there. Meanwhile, let's discuss. A lot of stuff came through here, and I just want to look at some of the things that we've already had about the time scarcity piece. And I think Janice said that we're trialing a new format this year. We've got quarterly meetings with middle management to decide which training topics will get priority. I think that sort of conversation, building the relationship and continuing it, is, I think, terribly important, as you were saying, Sara. The issue is always getting senior people on board. In the legal sector, this is interesting, Jill says, in the legal sector in which I operate, transactional work dominates, and few practices, and this is something which is very common in legal, a few practices have a focus on overall skills required for the future, because the legal sector is so focused on billable minutes that it's all about getting the transactions to be as effective as possible. How do you suggest the mindset might be focused on upskilling? So really good question there. And then we're going to move on to considering some of the stuff that Carl raised. But how do you get people to shift from the transactional view of skills to a longer term one?
So there's a great HBR article, Jill, if you wouldn't mind finding me on LinkedIn afterwards, I can send you the link to it. It's really fascinating. There's a case study on this exact thing. And it happened in Australia. And basically what the chap did was manage to evidence to the leaders of this. It was basically a group of legal partners, quite a large company, evidence that the impact that AI was going to have on their business. And that it was going to, all these billable hours could suddenly be done in minutes by AI. It's kind of like, so what does that mean for our work? Actually, it gives us much more time to do X, Y, and Z. So I'd love to send you the link to that HBR article if you find me on LinkedIn after this.
But
yeah. It's a fabulous case study. It's yeah.
Okay, that's great. I'm see if I can fish it out in the next couple of minutes. What, Laurent? Any thoughts about this? Getting people to shift their view. I mean, I love that. And one thing, one classic case study from the UK is that when people moved into their new offices in Docklands in London 20 years ago, they moved into offices where literally you had a person on each floor, one person who was in charge of the fax machine. They were in charge of the fax machine because faxes are really important, or were in legal business. And you can say to the guys, all right, where are your fax people now? And right, okay, that's what's happening, but 100 times more. We need to have a different skill set to cope with the future. Laurent, any thoughts about shifting?
Yeah, I'm honestly not an expert of the legal industry, but I think we also have to do some. So marketing of learning is needed, and also adjusting the modalities based on people's habits and preferences. So that's clearly something to be done systematically and can be done also for people to manage the constraints. I believe that one of the issue of the legal and some industry like the legal industry is compliance, that lawyers, auditors have required training, and that's probably a challenge because that's required training to maintain certifications. And you see, this is one of the difficulties of our industry is the compulsory training that is honestly not very engaging and might not give a good image of learning. So this is one of the challenge, and sometimes making sure that we separate completely both the must-have to maintain the certification and the must-have to grow and maintain my capability to be a lawyer in 5-10 years, as Sara was saying.
Sara, I've dropped something in the chat, the presenter chat. Have a look at that and see if that's the article which you're referring to. Meanwhile, let's quickly look at what Carl was saying. We've got 2 minutes.
Yep, that's the article. Well done, Don. It's like you and I read the same stuff.
Right. Okay. There it is. I'm just dropping that into the resources area. There it is. So the link is on the left-hand side there. Carl was saying, so much of this points to the importance of evaluation at the start, but he goes on in detail to talk about what he means by evaluation. Evaluation if there's a problem, what's the size and scope, the appetite people have to solve it, evaluating the evidence that this kind of intervention works generally. So it's much more than just saying, is there a problem? And then I love this bit at the end, evaluating post-intervention rarely rises above the level of correlation and is about fishing in the data for justification. I love that. I think that should be a poem that all L&D people should have to learn.
And it's so disrespectful of everyone's time as well.
It is.
That's the thing,
running around. So how do we make sure we get to Carl's right? How do we make sure we get that evaluation piece right at the beginning?
I would say maybe first to align with business before. So it's the post intervention that is for me the key word in this is we need to align with business before the intervention happens to say how you business will see that this intervention has been a success, and then agree on the chain of evidence to be able to that from the intervention to knowledge to skills to behaviors to finally being business impact. And that's the chain of evidence that should be agreed on before the intervention happens, so that we can also agree on a pragmatic way to measure that final success and this chain of evidence.
I remember exactly when we started doing that. It was 2017. When there were 2 of us in my team, in the learning technologies team, and Yolandi at the time came across this instructional design approach, and it just suddenly blew our minds. We had this realization about how we needed to do evaluation better. And it was really the start of our journey to where we are now in terms of how we are seen within the business.
I love that sense that there's this thread connecting evaluation and just making sure you are talking to people right at the beginning and you are having sensible conversations about, is there a requirement for training? Is there a performance issue here? Does it relate to skills and knowledge or something else? Right the way through in building the relationships and talking sensibly to it, right the way through to changing the attitude towards learning development and the department as a whole, which really is what this presentation is about, isn't it? You end up at a point where you do your job right, you have the right conversations. Guess what? You end up with a transformed view of what you're doing in the business, which is what everybody wants. But it's a result rather than an input. We are at 11 o'clock. My big clock tells me, I have 3 clocks around me. All of them are saying that it is 11 o'clock in the UK. We can't dodge it. We have started the year splendidly well. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along and joining us today. I want to say a big thank you to everybody in the room. Look, Victoria says, such a valuable session. Wasn't it? I love it. Thank you so much, Victoria. Really useful to chat and to be here together. Thank you so much for sharing part of your busy day with us. I want to say thank you to Sara Tindall of Nord Anglia and Laurent Balagué of Docebo for sharing their thoughts about this. Really, it's a strategic view of learning development that we should have to kick off the year. Sara, Laurent, any final words you want to leave us with?
You're not alone. Reach out. So many people are thinking about this from different perspectives. Don't try and do it by yourself. We're all here to share.
Great. Laurent?
And we are doing the best thing that we could do there. Helping people learn and grow is maybe the hardest but the most valuable and fascinating adventure.
Absolutely.
You're not alone and you're doing great things. Perfect. Okay, great way to begin the year. Looking forward to joining you all again. I hope at 12 o'clock, 1 hour's time, UK time. I'm going to close the door now. Sara, Laurent, stick around. We'll have a quick catch up. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.